Care Chats. Care Chats with Tanya, Mark, and Nick. Care Chats. Care Chats with Tanya, Mark, and Nick. Grab a mug of care and join us for some Care Chats with Tanya, Mark, and Nick.
Yes, please.
Hello, everyone. I am Tanya Mark, Oviedo, they, them, and this is Nick Benegoni, he, they, and we are Queer Spirit.
Hello, hello.
And we are thrilled, absolutely fucking thrilled to have Leah Garza of Crystals of Altamira with us. Leah, hello.
Hi. Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for those of you who have been listening to the podcast for a while, you may or may not have heard other guests refer to Leah and their programs in the Akashic Record Mentorship, which Tanya Mark has done, as well as Living Systems, these amazing programs. And we're here just to have a little care chat today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to talk about anything that comes up. I'm happy to share.
Woohoo! How fun. Yes, I am co-enrolled in both of Leah's programs. And yes, it is true that most of the guests that we've had on and folks that we've chatted with do mention Leah. So Leah, I guess it kind of makes sense. Like, would you mind describing Akashic Record Mentorship and Living Systems and these programs that you've created?
Sure. I have to talk a little bit, I guess, about my history then. So I've been an Akashic practitioner for about 11 years now, 10 years, 11 years. And previously I was a classroom teacher. I worked in nonprofits. I was an education organizer. I was not doing spiritual work whatsoever. I didn't have like a draw or pull or upbringing in that direction. And then I became unemployed and I started taking fun little classes and things to bide my time until I got a job. And an Akashic Record certification with my teacher, Helen Vonderheide, was one of those. And from the moment I tried it, it felt like as natural to me as like breathing. Like it was just, I had not even so much as like done a meditation in my life at that point. And we did this weird thing of opening the records. And this was in 2015. And I remember like the first time I opened the records, we had to go home, open the records on our own, come back to class and talk about what we received. And all the women, they're all like West Side yoga ladies in spiritual classes, like, oh, the records want me to love myself. And it got to me and I was like, they said that Trump's going to be the president and it's the last election for the United States. Whoa. And my teacher was like, follow that, like keep up with that. And everyone in the room was like, what? And I'm like, I don't know this stuff. And that was like, a year later, he did become president. And then now we're looking at maybe the end of democracy. So I just knew that like, oh, something's happening here. I don't know what this is, but something's happening here. And so for years, I never got a job in teaching again in the classroom. It just didn't work out for me, but this kind of blew up. And so I started a reading for people really out of desperation to make money because I couldn't get a job. And then I just started getting a following of people who were like, how do I be a reader like you? Like, what do I do? What do I do? And I had a real chip on my shoulder, a real like a feeling of burden that like I cannot teach people metaphysical practices or spiritual practices because of a fear of harming them. Like the Akashic practice is so nebulous and it's so not regulated and there's no protocol and there's no single way to do it. And so that opens up a huge margin, in my opinion, for like hurting people and misleading people and, being construed as a charlatan, which many, many people in my field are. And so I took about 8 years before I finally sat with, received my own guidance around how to do it. And it was like, it's going to be a year-long mentorship and it's not to teach people how to be readers. It's to teach people how to adopt an Akashic lens so that we don't need readers anymore. We don't need to yield our power to other people. They are not the authorities on us, but we're going to do it in a mentorship so we can do it in community, so we can witness each other and talk to each other and share what our experiences are. But we're going to stop yielding our power to, seers or knowers or experts or whatever, which in effect is like putting me out of business, because that was my bread and butter, is doing readings. But that has felt like the way for me. So I just finished my third cohort, or I'm in my third cohort.
Yeah. I love all that. And I want to rewind a little bit. Woo, 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 woo. For our listeners who may not know, what are the Akashic Records? A little bit about what it is. What are these things we're referring to?
Yeah, well, I just want to shout out to Ruth Camilla, because I heard them on here and they talked about it too. But it's such a, it exists and it doesn't exist. So for me, the study in the Akasha is a study of non-dual reality, that we live actually in a reality of non-binarized terms. But as we immerse ourselves and come into being in like a colonial framework, which is very binarized, we start to believe all the workings of the universe exist in binaries or polarities. And so Akasha is a Sanskrit word. It comes from a non-dual lineage of Hinduism, and it refers to the ether, which is one of the primordial building blocks of all of existence in those early Vedantic texts. And it is like the thing that arises before everything else. So even the air and the water, the fire, the earth, those building blocks of creation actually arose from the ether of the Akasha. And so do the Akashic records exist? Yes and no. In the late 1800s, there was a movement in Western Europe to become spiritual and study like Eastern religions. And so the groups like the Theosophists and the New Thought movement and people like Helena Madame Blavatsky moved themselves to the East to learn about Eastern philosophy, and they found this concept of the Akasha, and the way they understood it, so like this limitless ether that entails everything, all possibilities of creation. They were like, oh, it's like a record then of your soul. So they took this, like the framework of the world they lived in, which was like early like laissez-faire capitalism and like Victorianism, and took what they understood, and then they superimposed it over this like limitless, undefinable concept of the Akasha. And so then we get from there the trajectory into like New Age spirituality, which is really to take Western thought, Western frameworks, Western ontology, and then superimpose it onto like ancient and limitless traditions. And there's some problems there for sure, but from there, the Akashic records were born. There is no, to my understanding, there is no root of Akashic records in India. It is a Western created practice, even though historically, conceptually, the roots come from Advaita Vedanta. In that sense, it's like, do they exist? Sure, I've studied them. And do they also not exist? Of course they don't. It's a construction. Yeah.
What's coming to mind for me as you share all that, and thank you for explaining it in that way, because that's a different way that I've heard other people talk about it. Which makes sense, because they exist and they don't exist, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like tapping into the energetic or spiritual field of potentiality. It's not about like what is absolute, which is kind of similar to astrology. Like astrology is not like this is what's going to happen. The energies of the planets and the cosmos are creating energetic fields of potentiality, but nothing that's absolutely going to happen.
Well, I would actually say it entails both. So, like, if we pit absolutes against potentials, then we've created a binary. But if the Akasha is reflecting back to us all that exists, then there will be some absolutes that manifest into physical reality. Those exist there. There's potentials that never will. There's parallels. There's all these things that are in this kind of energy of consciousness.
Yeah. The other thing I think of for any sci-fi nerds out there is the concept of psychohistory from the Foundation, which is the Isaac Asimov book, which is also a series on Apple TV right now, which is this idea. They use kind of math, this idea of math or mathematical equations to sort of look at patterns that are happening and looking at the potential of what can happen, and they show it in these interesting graphical ways. But it's kind of, I think of that too.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about what we're doing. The concept of the records works for some people. It worked for me. That was like my entry into it, because I needed a concept that I could grasp onto. And so when I started the practice, that's what made sense to me. But as I moved through my practice, that stopped making it stopped accounting for all the experiences I was having in my practice. And I had to like expand past the idea of a record of my soul, to the point where I started questioning whether even a soul does that even exist? Is that just a construct also of individualism in some way, or of like some kind of construction that we've overlaid onto this, expansive consciousness? So like thinking about it like, a mathematical network or something could be another entry point for you, that like, oh, that makes sense to me. I'm going to think of it this way. Or like other people like to think of it as a library, because that's the concept that they can grasp onto. So I feel like it arrives in the way that is going to make the most sense to us. And the practice of my mentorship is to assist people in creating a devotion to it. So, in religious practices, it's largely framed around like an obligation to your practice, an obligation to whatever the dogma is. And that's very different than a devotion. A devotion comes from love. It comes from a place of like, I want to be here every day. I want to see what it says. I want to come back to the table every single day. And that relationship is so different, and it forms a different experience with that practice itself. Because there are days when I'm having a hard time and I go to the practice and it does not help me. And in a devotional framework, that's okay. You let that day go, and then you come back the next day, and you come back the next day. And so like creating the devotion, letting people create the way that they receive it. And, and there are some things that I'm like, that's the records, that's not the records. Or like, that's the Akasha, that's not the Akasha, that I feel certain on, but people can test me. There's no like, there's no one way. There's no way to certify this. There's no material evidence for it. So, yeah.
I'll jump in here as a person that that has come into, and when I met Leah, it was before mentorship, right? Ruthie and I met in your Akashic Record class, and that was like coming into it for me, being a person that has had for most of my life a devotional prayer and meditation practice, like for realsies, since I was a very young person. I hit a point in my decol journey where I really felt like there was ancestral healing, like this call to like go deeper. And the timing of finding you and the Akashic Record class, and reading Helen's book and going through the whole thing, and then it just was a point in time in my journey where it was like, oh wow, there's this. And then joining mentorship, it was a calling. I remember reaching out to you going, hey, I'm at a point in my journey where your program is calling me. Hey, Dolly, it's calling me. It's calling me. It's calling me. That's Leah's wonderful dog. She's amazing. And we're just getting confirmation from Dolly right now.
I know.
Another point in my journey where again, it was this idea of, how do I become more authentically me?
Yeah.
So my first iteration with the records was a lot of ancestral healing. I had the pleasure of having readings from you. Ruthie and I dipped in our connection. Then this mentorship came along, and it was like, holy moly, now we're going to come together as a group. You invited us to create our own invocation, and it really has deepened my devotion and practice with the records and really opened me up to, I don't know, I want to say a loving kindness in my practice that I didn't realize I needed until I came into the Akashic Record Mentorship and was like, whoa, maybe these other valves need to be turned down a bit. Like the critical, not turned down, but listened to in a different capacity, I guess would be a way to share that.
Yeah.
And to also really open myself up. These questions, and when we go into the records, they're no joke. And we also were put into our own mini pods, where in those mini groups, we've been able to explore as a community. Our group in particular has chosen to go through the questions that are offered in the program, and we do it as a group. So there's a lot of medicine, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of medicine there in ways that, and I don't think there's only one entry point to the records, because when you hear how people have discovered them or discovered your programs, the entry points are all super different.
Yeah. I think that's the main conflict I have with students and with clients is that, how do I say it? I think if I had to distill everything down to one issue that we all face, is that we insist that life experience and existence be punishing. And the Akashic Records is simply not. And we build identities around deserving the punishments that we think we deserve. So one of the frameworks, one of the values that we teach and we talk about every single time we meet in the mentorship is that people are inherently good. And that is a triggering thing to say, because from the moment we're born, we're taught that you have to earn your goodness. You're not good. Like to be, like in other religions, like to be born is like, part of the original sin. Like to, like you're constantly going to be fighting an uphill battle to show that you are a good person. And so we spend a year together because it takes such a long time. And some people don't get there in a year, which I totally understand. Like unwinding that sense of reality and what would happen if we start from the other side of the pendulum with like, oh, actually I'm inherently good. And so all the things I do are good. And when we study non-dual reality, there really can't be a good and a bad. So then, and I use the word good because it's intentionally there to trigger you. a little mean thing I do, a little diabolical. It's there to trigger you because we come into this practice so certain of our badness that the word good is incredibly loaded. It's the trigger point. And so what we learn as we go through the mentorship, as we go through this practice, as we really immerse into non-dualism, is that actually we're all inherently neutral. But even neutral then exists in kind of a tug of war with like neutral or plus minus charge, like it's one or the other. And then we keep wandering down this non-dual path and we learn like, actually, I just inherently am. I just inherently exist. And because I exist, all the things about belonging are mine. Belonging is my birthright because belonging is existing is belonging. And so what are all the things that I was taught and programmed around from an early age in this cultural ontology and colonialism in my family and my culture that made me fight to feel like I can belong here? And that's why we spend the first year just working on ourselves, not trying to like be a reader of someone else. Like it takes a long time to let this sink in.
I was going to also mention, Leah, thank you for breaking that down, but also there's Akashic Record Mentorship Part 2, right? There's
Yeah.
also the second part of the program where we get even deeper. I also want to mention that do yourself a favor. I want to invite our listeners to, I believe you're doing readings, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to dip into that, there's the invite to find Leah. We'll provide that information. Nick, where were you going?
Oh, I was going to go on a whole other tangent, but maybe we'll save that for another time.
No, let's go.
Well, I was going to throw a monkey wrench into this idea of belonging because that's also a dualistic concept of belonging versus not belonging, right?
Yeah, totally.
And I like this idea of just coming back to I am.
Yeah.
I am here, whether I am belonging or not belonging.
Yeah.
And I think that's especially important, with all that's happening in the world with queer folks, belonging, not belonging, with I belong to this group, not that group, or I belong on this land and not that land kind of thing. And
absolutely.
It's just like,
it impacts all people, right?
Yeah.
Like, period, like in some kind of way. And I want to add to that, I think we are is another way of we are, we belong here, we are here. Like, it's the I am and the we are. That's the way that I look at that in my practice, right? To expand it out that way. So, woo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leah, thank you for being here and sharing so much about Akashic Records. And we really want to get into living systems. So for those of you listening, let's come back next week and listen to part 2 with Leah sharing more about living systems.
Yeah, y'all, do yourself a favor. Get a reading from Leah Garza. Pay attention to when Akashic Record Mentorship is being offered again. And please, please, please consider joining. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And you can find Leah at crystalsofaltamira.com, and we'll have that link in the show notes.
Care Chats with Tanya, Mark, and Nick.